Okay, and we are live. Go ahead, Linus, and take it away.
All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Taidu Studios live stream number 34. As always, our host is Sean Taidu Head. Say Ohio Sensei.
Ohio Sensei.
It's going to be one of those days, is it? All right. I'm your humble live stream doula, Linus Yume Callahan, and today we are making good on a promise that Sean made last week. Which, if you're a regular viewer of this channel, you know that Sean said that we should have a live stream where we talk about quotes and compare and contrast important quotes throughout history. And I know that Sean didn't remember that. So, so,
Way to
so
throw me
this
under
should
the
be interesting.
bus.
Now, I know we talked last week a little bit about, I mentioned the quote that poetry is the best words in the best order, Samuel Taylor Coleridge. But he contrasted that with prose, which was he just said words in the best order. So that's for Coleridge, that was the difference between poetry and prose was words in the best order. The best words in the best order is poetry.
Mm.
So that kind of comparison, that type of push and pull between quotes is what I sort of wanted to steer us into first today.
Absolutely. A lot of things we can
And
talk about there.
and also I feel like this is really appropriate for today because April 21st is the traditional day upon which Rome was founded. Rome was founded on April 21st, according to Roman tradition. So we're set up to have, one of those sort of Hellenistic debates about the meaning of quotes. It's perfect, perfect timing, synchronicity.
Do we get lions and peasants who, broke the law that we get to watch fight to the death?
No,
Oh,
and
damn it.
I have a feeling that that type of entertainment would really sell today. Unfortunately,
Did
I don't think humanity's come very
Now,
far.
did you bring this to HR and HR shot you down?
Yeah, it was the guys in legal.
Oh,
They told
jeez.
me
I'm
that.
firing them. They're fired,
Well,
okay?
it's the cruelty to the lions is what they were concerned about.
They're always
Do you know
good.
there used to be lions in Western Europe, and they one of the beliefs I don't know if this is statistically true, but one of the beliefs is that the European lion was depopulated by the Roman Empire because they were capturing and using so many of them in the arena.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
yeah,
Okay. During the yeah. Okay. There's used to be likely during classical times or perhaps as the late Middle Ages, the lions went extinct in Europe. Wow.
yes, yes. So
Interesting.
anyway, back to our original concept here. We
Yes.
have two quotes that I want to compare and contrast.
All right.
Okay, the first is reputedly Albert Einstein, probably not something Einstein actually said, but it's always attributed to him. And that is never memorize something you can easily look up.
Hmm. Oh,
Okay,
jeez. Okay.
about and this I think goes hand in hand with the mythology about Einstein not wanting to waste any brain power on things that you didn't need to, like the idea that Einstein had several suits that were identical that he could just go to his closet and get dressed every day without thinking. And I don't know if these are sort of apocryphal stories about Einstein, but it is someone said that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it is attributed to Einstein. And the other quote to contrast with it is by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the author of Gulag Archipelago on the Soviet gulags. And he wrote, own only what you can always carry with you. That is, no languages, no countries, and no people. Let your memory be your travel bag. So, an interesting comparison of the
Yeah,
importance of
they're
memory.
they're a direct punch against each other. Well,
Yeah.
the thing is that um especially in our day, most people don't commit anything to memory. They look everything up, or they always have, the music in front of the stand. Which, like, I understand, like for someone who especially has like has had a life that was a very busy performance schedule, you don't have time to memorize every single piece that comes across your stand,
Mm,
and so on. But I've memorized all of the notes, but I could easily look up the notes. It's so
sure.
I don't like. I mean, of course, we can take this into extremes, right? And whatever. But I think like the general thing is like this sort of idea of factoids. Like, oh, I know exactly which book that quote is in, so I'm not going to memorize that quote. As Laron Harrison is saying, Einstein wouldn't survive in the Heian period because everything was memorized. All of the poets and all of these like the
Yes.
Manyonshu, that was like that's classical, poetry that people would memorize. And actually when you learned poetry back then, you would sing it. And so it was yeah, it was very high art in those days. So yeah, he
I
would
will.
not
Uh,
survive.
yeah, I also think that there's something to be said for having instantaneous recall of things. I remember when I was a child, just shortly after the Civil War,
I
the
thought
South.
that was just after the Enlightenment.
Yeah, yeah, it feels like it. No, we had to memorize a lot of stuff. I
Yep.
remember we had to memorize the 50 states in
Hmm.
alphabetical order, and we had to memorize the role of presidents in
Hmm.
order.
And
And that's stuff that my children would not even attempt to memorize. My children would just look at me like, "Why?"
well, so
So,
okay, so and I think that I do think we might be getting off into the woods once again, but there's a reason why we have mnemonic devices, and there's ways
mm,
to like memorize certain things. So back in the Edo era, what there was a book that was. And I think Laurent can confirm or deny this for me. I love it when Laurent's here. Laurent is my easy way to look up things so I don't have to memorize it. You just call on LeBron. Is this true? I can't remember this person's name. There was a book by Kukai which had all of these four note or at least four kanji's characters. They're called Yotsu Jitsugo or Yotsu. Yeah. So there's a four character saying, right? And they're really also really popular in China too. And in China, they memorize this, and this is actually how you memorize characters. In the Edo era, they did the same thing. So you had all of these like pithy four character sayings, like Ichigo Ichie, right? So one like once in a lifetime sort of meaning. So you memorize the characters. Yeah. Yoji Jukugo. Yeah, not Yotsu Yoji. So Yoji means four characters, and then Jukugo. And Yeah, anyways, so you would use those and you'd memorize characters and also memorize like ideals, specifically kind of Buddhist ideals and Neo-Confucian ideals as well.
mm,
So, but today, like even in the church, for example, in like our modern church, most of the people that I meet don't have any creeds or confessions memorized, let alone any Bible verses. Young kids don't have anything memorized in terms of like the periodic table of elements, though we have a song that goes along with that that makes it very easy to memorize.
mm.
They don't memorize formulas and equations in mathematics anymore, and you're allowed to have open book test. So yeah, it's like I think that there are certain things that you don't have to necessarily commit to memory, because it isn't of great importance to have that like on the fly, but
Mhm.
you get yourself in a lot of trouble by saying never memorize something that you can easily look up because there's a lot of things I could easily look up.
Well, and also that idea of easily looking something up is very different nowadays with smartphones than it was even, say, 20 years ago. Smartphones were around, but they weren't as ubiquitous. And I know from my own experience that when I was in high school, I had off the top of my head 15 or 20 phone numbers memorized,
Oh yeah,
friends,
yeah.
my parents, that sort of thing. And now I don't even know my own phone number. Like every time someone's like, "Oh, can I get your phone number?" I'm like, "Yeah," and I have to pull my phone out and look it up myself because I don't even know that. So, yeah, there's definitely
Let's see
a
here.
it's a muscle. You have to exercise it. You know,
Yep,
you have to continue to use it.
absolutely, absolutely. So let's look at get to the other quote, and then I want to complain about something else. All right, here we go. And the English translation they put as four character compound. Yeah, that's what it's called. All right. So what's the other quote again?
The Solzhenitsyn quote, is that what you're talking about?
Yes, that one.
He says, "Own only what you can always carry with you." And then there's a colon, and he has a list. No languages, KNOW, should
Yeah.
say. No languages, no countries, no people. Let your memory be your travel bag.
Okay.
Coming from someone who spent time in a gulag, you can understand why you would take this attitude, right? If you don't have it memorized, you literally don't have it
Well,
because
yeah.
there is no looking things up in
So
a gulag.
I've had this sort of like end of the world sort of scenario, and I think we've talked about this too together. Like, what happens when we have like the sun actually does another Carrington event, and everything that we have here is whatever. Do I
Yeah,
actually have all of my students' addresses and stuff like that? Because we can still do mail, right? I can still send everything to everybody and all that good stuff. Do I actually have all of my music and whatever? Now, if you have your music memorized, doesn't matter because if it
yeah.
goes or not, you have it. You can rewrite it out yourself, and you can keep it for posterity purposes.
Mm,
But let's say if you have everything that's digital, which you are digitizing everything for me
yeah.
right now, but I still keep all of the hard copies of everything, right?
Yeah, it's really hard to argue in favor of either side, I feel like. Like obviously if you have the technology available to you, then it would be foolish not to make use of it, not to digitize things, not to make things easily searchable and whatnot. But it also would be foolish to only rely on that. It feels like this is one of those situations where the obvious answer is the middle path, right? Where
Mhm.
you're using both.
Hmm.
I just feel like these kind of debates, these kind of discussions always end up becoming black and white.
Yeah, but it's never a sort of a black and white issue, right? It's
Yeah.
always these things sort of fall into the gray. And and this is where it sort of brings me to the point of like I don't like universal quotes, right?
Yeah.
When something says everything is like this, like when that the Walter Patterson quote, for example, not Patterson. Why do I not remember his name? Um,
I'm not sure who you're referring to.
Yeah, sorry. I have to look up I know the quote. I don't know who said it now, so I have to look it up. Walter Patter
Very.
is his last name, not Patterson. So the quote of his is all art constantly aspires to the condition of music. So now there's a problem with that quote. As much as as a musician, I love it. I go, yeah, that's right. Serve it right up, other artists. We're number one. We're on top, baby. Until you say, well, what condition does music aspire to be? Well, to the condition of music. Like, oops, you've got a problem there, buddy. That's not going to work
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah, and I also think that there's on a purely sort of personal development level, if you don't ever memorize something, or memorize things, then have you really mastered that material? Like think for example of how difficult it would be to compose your own music or improvise if you didn't know the circle of fifths or at least have some kind of idea about the circle of fifths, right?
Mhm.
Like if you haven't memorized the circle of fifths or have a good at least the four or five keys that you always use,
Yeah.
right? If you haven't memorized that, then and you're constantly referring to a chart, you don't really master that information.
No, as a composer, I would say, look, even if you're not using traditional Western harmonic techniques, you got to know the circle of fifths, and there's a lot of reasons behind it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got out my ranting for the first 10-15 minutes, which is very much appreciated. So now it's time to move on to more things Shakuhachi related. If you haven't liked this video yet, like this video. If you're not subscribed, come on, man, subscribe. We just had some new subscribers that also joined the channel this week, and we have one that had joined just before the start of this video, who I cannot see his name because my thing is being blocked by two of the things that I put up. So I think it is welcome to the Let's Shows and Listen series. What is your name? I can't see it. Oh well. He's at the top there, but thank you for joining. So let's get into some Shakachi stuff. This is the 1.9 that we were talking about before, and the video of that is up. And so, if you're interested in checking out more about this flute, that video has just been released. So one of the things we're doing in the studio right now is we're going to start collecting some items to share with you, old flutes, famous flute makers, and we'll talk about their like why they're so important and stuff like that. And so you'll see a video like that video is available for you right now to check out. And so this one was just such an interesting one because of just how beautiful it is in terms of the maki. And the question I get sometimes is, well, how common is like stuff like this maki on flutes? And surprisingly, it actually is quite common. There's a lot of people who get who would get on their favorite flutes, ones that they use for, you know, um, most of their life, or the flutes that they just absolutely fell in love with, and they would name them. They would give them a name, just kind of like how we have Stradivari violins that have names, and it's called like this or that, or like the Hofmeister violin or something like this, named after the family who owns it or something like that. And so sometimes these flutes get names. And so, for example, one of my favorite flutes that I own is my personal Jinashi flute, where I named it Kakume, which is the crying crane. And so I think that um, this sort of tradition can be continued, and you can keep getting flutes like that, as well as getting flutes named yourself. We actually have somebody that works for the studio that does makie professionally, and so if you ever wanted to name your flute, hit me up and I'll get you connected with a makie guy to christen your flute.
My flute's name is Bob.
Yeah, there's a very good character for Bob. Okay, and it means the first character is man, and the second character is average.
Yeah, yeah. That's my 1.6. His name is Bob. And
No offense to anybody named Bob.
yeah, no, he's just he. When I started playing and got to know it, it's a Bob. It's one of those questions. Do you think of your flutes as male or female? That's the other thing. Ships. We always think of them as female.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah. I see what you're saying. Because I was about ready to go into a long diatribe of how there actually is female and male bamboo,
sure, sure.
but
But I mean, like guitars, for example. I always think of guitars as female.
uh
And I think that some of it has to do with body shape, but also just you know they're for whatever reason they fall into that category. Like ships, tend to think of them as female.
hmm.
So I don't know, but my flutes. I think my flutes are they vary because I definitely have flutes that I feel are sort of masculine, and then I have flutes that are feminine, and I don't really know why. I'm not really sure why.
So this particular flute's name is Meidu, which is your name in like inverted, right? So it's the
Yep.
also the dragon character is slightly different. There's multiple different types of dragon characters. So
Mhm.
we have, for example, I'm writing in the chat now. We have this character, which is, and we also have this character. Let's see, Tatsu. Let's see if I can find it quickly. We also have this one. This one is with water put onto it. Gosh, I could write this out in calligraphy faster than it is for me finding this thing. But anyways, there's actually two or three more characters for dragon that has one has the character for water next to it. And of course we have the one that was without water, and then we have this other one at the bottom as well. So there's multiple variations, and this one has the water character right here onto the right side, and then the standard dragon character that we're used to seeing. So
Svenja is mentioning that her flutes need names now because there is finally more than one, and that's true. If you only have one flute, then there's you just the flute,
I I
my flute.
see remember remembering this. Let's see if I'm correct on it. So it's like the classical names of Japan. It's just like Ichido or like Nijido, which are all just basically like first child, second child, third child, and then like your name
Uh,
would change later as you had matured.
Yes. The Romans used to name their daughters after their father. So if your father's name was Julius and you were a girl, you would be Julia, and then they would give you numbers. There was Julia Prima, Julia Secundus, Julia Tertius, and so on.
Yeah, that's about right. It's like when that's how like George Foreman named his kids. George
That's
Foreman the
funny.
first, George Foreman the second, George Foreman the third.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, and I think that the the Prima Secundus Tertius type names,
Hmm.
uh, it's actually more common than we know. Like there are many cultures that don't give children like real names until they reach a certain age, age of majority, or in some cases a religious. There's a threshold where you go through a certain religious process, and then you become like an adult, and you get a real name at that point.
Nice. That's right. You get a real name. All right.
Yeah,
So let's open up the chat for questions and techniques and all about shakuhachi. And in the meantime, while we do that, I'll have you generate a couple questions for me, Linus, and I will just kind of showcase this flute. So
cool.
here is the Maydew flute. All right, that is our little example of this Jinashi flute. Full Jinashi, by the way, I found out.
That flute is I got a chance to play it the other day, and that flute is fantastic, and so different from other flutes of its sort. Did talk about the finger inserts on the
Mm.
holes. It's very strange. I've never played it. It reminds me almost of Western flutes with open hole keys.
Yeah,
It's
it's kind of like that actually because of these little silver inserts. And so it actually really feels quite nice on the fingers. You can actually just feel everything, sort of lock as it were.
mm,
It also has mammoth in the bottom too. So this is mammoth. And then also in the top, the Udaguchi is also mammoth ivory.
that's amazing.
Yeah. So whoever like they put so just these two characters, by the way, would probably have cost something about like $1,000 just to get those in. And it's also done really, really well. And the other thing too about this, like, so if I hold it up closely, you can see that it has like a patina to it, like it's starting to fade.
Mm,
This is when it looks like when it's not faded at all,
right.
right? And so it's very fresh. I mean, it looks beautiful, but you see, like it just doesn't have the same level of like shimmer, as it were, right?
Hmm.
As it goes old, it gets that shimmering, and this is the aesthetic uh, class of shakuhachi called wabi sabi, or of art called wabi sabi. This sort of
Mm.
things fading away. Things are also related to mono no aware, but that's sort of that aesthetic class, and you can kind of see why it's so highly desired because it does look fantastic as it ages, and it's more beautiful than the fresh coat of paint, as it were.
Sure. Now you said that there's no maker's mark on that piece. Is it that there never was one, or that it has been obliterated in
It
some way?
No, it was removed. So what they did is this entire flute has actually been shaved. So not down here, but basically from about this point upwards, the entire flute has been sanded. And if you look close enough, you can actually see the sanding marks,
Sure.
right? And so the reason why that was done is because you have to create a surface that allows for the lacquer to stick. So if you just have it on the top of the skin of the bamboo, it will crack and fade and whatever. And that's what happens with a lot of those old shakuhachi that you see that are lacquered. They have like a they're all black. You'll see that they're cracked and they're kind of missing pieces and chunks and whatever. They
Mm,
basically they didn't prepare the flute at all. They just put on a really big thick coat of lacquer, put it into a lacquer box and was like, good, it's done. And it looks good for the first like, couple years or so. But then after that, they start cracking and chipping and stuff like that. So the same thing
yeah.
happens here. So what they did is by doing that, they were able to lacquer the entire thing to keep the flute safe. So actually, this makes the flute pretty much impossible to crack because it's done with a clear lacquer coat on top of it. Then putting these little designs on top of that as well becomes so much easier, and you can do a much better job. So the reason why these characters pop so much and they have so much beauty behind them is because it has a clear coat of lacquer underneath. So it wasn't just like, oh, I'm just gonna put a couple characters here, whatever. This is a full like project to get this thing done. And so when I'm saying that they put a lot of money and time into it, they put a lot of money and time into making this flute what it is.
Yeah, it's really interesting that there's no, like it's kind of a dead end when you start looking into the provenance of it, like where it came from, who made it, that sort of thing. Just there's not a lot of places to look. You kind of hit a wall with that.
Yeah, my sort of thought on this one is that it's probably it was probably a Myowan flute that they kind of spiffied up a little bit. The reason why I think that is even though that the hole size is larger, that's not the biggest issue. Because they did have hole sizes started getting larger in the 20th century. That's not a big, shock to anything. Now, if they were saying this is an Edo flute, I would say no because the hole sizes just don't match. Also, just the bore profile. The bore profile is more modern. Even though it's a modern jinashi, it is a modern way of doing it because the nodes on the inside of the flute are basically have been shaven down completely. Now, also the fact that it is in two pieces too is another thing. Normally with these sort of flutes here, you can kind of see now on the inside, it has that rough interior. That you can see where the nodes were, so it's not like they were covered up by G or anything like that. But most typically speaking, jinashi flutes are always done in nobekan,
Yeah.
because they want to keep the integrity of the natural bore profile of the bamboo. So it's a little bit of a hybrid situation here because you have part of the style is like, yeah, this is sort of like Myowan, it's Towari tuning, it's really focusing on the color. It's the Utaguchi, the dip in it, is not that intense. Let's see, I think Yozan does. His is 3 millimeters. This is like 2.5, not even. I maybe say it's a pretty thin like Utaguchi dip there. So you can kind of see the
Mm,
modern one when it's about 3 centimeters. The classical one that's much closer to the classical style um of a of an Utaguchi. I would if I was to give a number for what the Utaguchis would be like in terms of their dip. Tozan flutes tend to be somewhere like 3 millimeters, and Kinkos are a little bit deeper, about 4 millimeters. But it's also going to be different maker to maker.
yeah.
So some people will have more shallow utiguchis. For example, Yokusui the first, his flutes, their utiguchi is actually quite shallow. But then if you go to someone like Myoryuho, his utiguchis are really deep. And so like his is like his are I think the what Nick had told me is Tozan is 3 millimeters and Kinko is 4 millimeters deep. And so 4 millimeters is big. Like that's a really deep utiguchi.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a fascinating like sort of deep dive to like try and sort out one of these flutes. Every time I see a flute that nowadays, I see flutes that don't have maker's mark fairly frequently, and it's just blows my mind. It's very frustrating.
Mm. What's really interesting, you know that Yozan actually does all of his cuts by eye. Like they're not measured out. Like so these two Utaguchi cuts,
Mm,
you can see that they're slightly different,
sure.
right? That's because he eyeballs it. He does not measure it out so it becomes the exact same each time.
Yeah, and again, that's the thing we talked about last week. How long does it take to make a flute like that? 55 years.
Yeah, 55 years. That's right.
It's a lifetime expressing itself in one stroke of the saw. It's
And it's
crazy.
actually like, and I think you could probably talk about this because I know you've done woodwork before. It is not easy, friends, to cut a straight line. Okay.
No, no, good grief. No, no, especially in an organic material that has grain and a mind of its own.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
That thing
very difficult.
slips. There's a good question we have here. Is deeper equals easier marry? No. It's actually the opposite. So if the Utaguchi is more shallow, it's easier to marry, and you can do a lot more with the breath than you can if it's deeper. What easier way to think of it is deeper equals louder.
Yeah, I
So
think, well, and I think also that just so much of what works and doesn't work on any given flute is there are so many variables involved because that flute that you're discussing I played the other day and didn't really notice a huge difference
mhm.
in the depth of the Utaguchi. I think that flute plays really nicely, feels really easy to play.
That's one of the things about a shallow Utaguchi though is that it is easier to play.
Well, it plays quite nicely and didn't feel significantly different from my Yozan.
Yeah.
So I didn't
Well,
I didn't really notice any difference in the Utaguchi.
Yozan's Utaguchis aren't that deep either.
Oh, okay.
Right? And I mean, they are much deeper than this, but we're not talking like he doesn't go to that like that 4 millimeter range or anything like that.
Yeah.
But here it's like if I wanted to play just like a very simple roll, right? I'm not blowing into the flute. I'm breathing into the flute. Right? So something like that, right? It's and that's this is what this flute is supposed to sound like. It's much more about tone color. It's not meant to be like one that you go like it won't do that for you. Not the type of flute it is. It's not meant to be blasted on. Oh,
Yeah, I tell you what, I'm looking forward to the when this flute is completely restored. You're
oh, it
talking
is.
about
It is restored
oh
completely.
oh I
Yeah,
thought you were gonna have the
I did.
Nakatsuki work on.
Yep, and it did. It's all been re done. Linus, that is in the video that I did of it.
Oh, well, I did not. I don't,
Oh,
you
you
know, well,
didn't prepare because you're a part of the channel and you make the videos on the channel.
I have not actually watched the video. I thought you were going to send it off to Yozan and he was going to work on the Utaguchi as well. Wasn't
Yeah,
there something you
he
wanted
did.
cleaned up there?
Yeah, he did.
That Wow, the turnaround on that was incredibly fast.
Yeah,
Okay.
because the repairs on it were so minimal, right? It was literally this needs a paint like a little shave down on the Utaguchi on the behind the Utaguchi, lacquer, blend it, and then redo the middle joint, right? Or
Okay.
reshape the middle joint. So it really wasn't a big. All that stuff could have been was done in a day.
Oh, okay. Cool. All right. Well, if you're ready to move on, we do have some questions in our Discord that I think are fruitful.
Okay, there is one
Um,
question from JJ that I want to get to first, and then we'll jump over to the
okay.
Discord questions. So JJ says, "Is it possible that an O-shaped embouchure makes a flute sound warmer? I have made subtle changes to sound louder in recordings with other music and noticed a fuller sound. So the O shape will give you a lot more resonance into the chest. Whereas if you did something that was more like an U shape, you would get a warmer but less full. So when you're saying warmer, I would say that the U vowel would be better. But like you're saying, O is fuller and you get more deep resonance in your tone. So Good
And
question.
also, when you have to be careful what you're talking about when you say "oh" and "ooh," because I mean, if you're
Oh.
talking about the vowel shape inside your mouth,
Mm.
right, as opposed to a sort of more surface level understanding of
Or
what
like
you're
the
actually doing with your lips.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm pretty sure he means by the tongue shape, because
Yes.
yeah, but yeah. So that's a good follow up comment there is about the specific. It's not the lip shape; it's the vowel shape inside the mouth.
Yes. All right. So we have a debate going on our Discord right now, or it's not really a debate. It's just a lot of people have different ideas about it. One of our fellow students is about to give his recital,
Mm-hmm.
and he writes, "I have around 1 week to prepare for my Okuden concert.
Mm-hmm.
I've been through my pieces with Sean. I've also played a rehearsal concert for friends,
Ah,
and it
yes.
was tough." And then he
Mm.
says, "I'm basically kind of ready, but would like to build some strength for the concert. It's so hard to play several pieces in a row.
Mm.
Any tips from fellow musicians?" And there's been quite a few comments, but I thought we might touch on what you would say in that situation, Sean.
Yeah, I would say. Well, it's kind of funny because I wouldn't necessarily say it to him because he's already really in shape, but I would say work out. But in this case, it would be work out with your flute. So going hiking and doing stuff like that, I think would be the answer for this. Is that you want to build up a type of endurance that's more about blowing the flute and utilizing your lungs more intensely.
Okay. Yeah, part of the thing that pops into my head with this question is he says, "I've got about a week."
Yeah,
And that's really tough, you know. If you've got longer, if you've got more time, then there's a lot more
yeah.
things you can do.
Well, that's why it's one of the things I do is that before my concerts, I usually go on a really long hike. So 2 3 hours, I bring my flute with me and I just play things I like in the mountains. And that for me, that's just one thing I really enjoy. I like having like a sort of a labored breath and then having to control that. Because if you do get anxiety or if you do get a little bit of like jittery nerves, if you're already having this labored high heart rate breath that you're used to playing in the mountains, a little bit of nerves on stage is no issue. You can still control your breath
Right.
just perfectly fine. I also noticed that my tone becomes a lot better after I do those things. So,
Mm,
Linus, can you take over for just about 3 minutes? Gotta do my
sure.
gonna do a quick break.
All right. The debate on the Discord has gone on with a lot of people offering advice, and one piece of advice that I thought was really good from another student was that you can sort of approach your recital as a story, and you're telling us something about your path and about the piece and about your experience with it, so that you get a minute or two of rest between each piece, and that kind of patter the discussion of the piece you're about to play and your experience with the piece, I think is really important in shakuhachi because so often we're playing for an audience that isn't those of us that are Western players, we're playing for an audience that isn't steeped in the tradition of shakuhachi, that hasn't grown up listening to it their whole lives. And being able to explain where the piece came from, what it's about, and your experience of learning it or your experience with playing it is invaluable. It's not like a Western concert where you can walk in and play, six pieces that are standards and expect everyone in the audience to at least have heard of them beforehand. That's
Sure.
definitely not the case with our repertoire. Um, Another thing that came up in the discussion was the idea of meditating before playing.
Mm,
Trying to, the person who added this comment said, "I don't, it's not something I always remember to do, but when I do it, it makes a big difference." And meditating, focusing on the way I would feel if the performance went wonderfully and what that might sound like and the kind of flow state I'd be in. So like visualizing a positive outcome.
It's really interesting. The whole thing about like telling stories and stuff like that. It's one of the things that I encourage my students to do, and I require them to do during their Okuden recital, that they talk about each piece. Now, and I tell them that, you don't have to give a dissertation about this piece comes from this region and was famously paid by this person in this style, and it's from this particular temple, which has these sort of aesthetic attributes to it. No, like no one cares about that. But what I tell them to say is talk about what is your personal connection with the piece. What are the things that you struggled with when you learned it, or what are the things that you enjoy about it, and why is the reason why you chose it for your recital in the first place. And when I do my own concerts, I do lots of communicating about pieces because I want to guide the listener to experience the piece in the way that how I fell in love with it. Because I could just say, "Oh yeah, this is the piece Shingetsu. That's it, done." Means means Heart of the Moon. It's a great piece, right? But that doesn't do anything for the listener, right? It doesn't help them. It doesn't guide them. It doesn't give them anything tangible to work with, right?
Yeah.
So if I say though that this piece is for me, right now I talk about personal subjective part of it. This piece for me is the epitome of the expression of love and taking action. And then they go, okay, well now I'm interested. Now I tell them that when we talk about love, that it's an idea that's been um, covered up with rose tinted glasses and been misshapen to be something that's actually as eros, but not actually agape,
Mm.
meaning that most of it is lovey dovey, princess, damsel in distress, that sort of thing, and save, and then everything becomes like sexually, you know, uh, has sexual underpinnings to it. So it is the erotic, but love in its most absolute form is sacrificial, meaning that you put yourself aside and your own needs to put the other of someone else's needs in front of you. So now that the audience member has an idea of what I mean when I say love, and then I say to them, when you hear the opening of this piece, you'll hear the pounding of the heart as a sense of love pouring out for that other person, like in sort of the metaphorical blood pouring out. Yeah, the love is pouring out for that other person. Now when a person hears that opening line, the first thing that comes to their mind is blood pumping through the body, and so on. So if you do that with the listener and you lead them along with the story, and you have something so tangible in your mind about how this piece is supposed to go and why it's supposed to go that way, you don't have time to think about how nervous you are. Okay? So there's method to my madness on why I do this, right? I don't have any sort of worries or anxiety on stage because I'm so busy about thinking about the story and what I'm gonna say and all these other things that I prepared, to the point it's like I don't have time to, who cares how many people are in the audience? Who cares, how much time I have to prepare for it? I've got work to do. I don't have time to worry.
Okay, so to be the devil's advocate here, I would say that on the flip side, there is something to be said for, um, especially I'm thinking of a piece like Yamagoe, for example, that has like a really dynamic introduction, really dynamic first couple of breaths, and there's something to be said for not saying anything as well. Come out, big statement, hit that, those first couple of breaths are big and kind of
Mhm.
in your face and grab the audience's attention. And so there's something to be said for letting a piece speak on its own as well. So I feel like maybe there's a balance of sometimes you want to give a lot of patter and sometimes nothing. This is back to the discussion we had earlier of like it's becoming black and white. I think
Mhm.
there's a path through the middle that might be, a best practice is to let the piece sort of speak to you and tell you how much you should patter about it. I don't know.
Okay. You know why opera is dead? Or why it's
Well,
so okay, so
because it's in Italian.
no, because even because actually the one of the greatest ones is not. one of the most popular operas, and is La Boheme, right?
Yes.
What is the first opening line of La Boheme?
I try to avoid opera. I grew up with an opera singer. My mother is an opera singer, and I hated it from a very young age. So I've tried to avoid it.
So the opening quote in the opening line is of a painter painting the Red Sea, and it has the biblical narrative of the the freeing of the Israelites and the divine punishment of the Egyptians, which flows out into the rest of the opera. So if you don't know the first line and don't know what that means and don't know its theological backings, the entire opera doesn't make sense anymore.
Mm,
Okay, so if you don't know or don't have an image of something in mind and what you're trying to transfer to that other person, right, then it becomes meaningless. This is the sort of thing where for some reason I knew this was going to happen. We were talking about Schopenhauer, right, before the
yes.
thing starts, right? So he said that music is pure will, but without representation, right? Has zero representation. But the problem with that is then I guess that my instrument here is just the delusion. It's a figment of my imagination. It's not actually real. The musical notes that are on the page right now, those also are just figments of your imagination. They're not actually music. There's zero representation there whatsoever. And of course, the syntactical structures that exist inside music, that also is just a figment of your imagination. Music does have meaning. Music does have things that it represents. And you can tell people that and you can explain that so they have something to listen to and grab onto and they can ride along with the story. So, I think that just playing the piece, like if you play Beethoven's third, it means nothing if you don't know anything about the French Revolution. It
Yeah.
means nothing if you don't know anything about his relationship with Napoleon. So you can't
Yeah, which
play Beethoven's third without knowing the historical backings and the story that goes along with it. Now that doesn't mean that if you have a piece, for example, like Shingetsu wasn't written about that. But I'm attaching the story to it to give it that meaning, though it has its own separate meaning when Tani Kyochiku wrote it.
Yeah, this comes back to that idea that I was talking about, where it depends on the education and sort of level of your audience. Because if the audience is aware of these things, then pattering about it might not be that necessary.
Hmm.
Whereas if the audience is like not familiar with the repertoire, not
Hmm.
familiar with the standards of whatever you're playing, it's necessary to kind of bring them along. And I think as foreign as Western players of a Japanese instrument, it sort of behooves us to explain pretty much pretty much always. We're going to have someone in the audience, amongst our family and friends, or just Western listeners who have no idea what's going on.
Well, here's what I say. You know what they say about assumption. So, moving on to Purdue. Hi, what exercise is good as a good practice to practice all the octave? I'm struggling to find a way to sound good changing octaves. So,
You and me both, brother. Um, it's funny how many of these questions are, the student asks a question and you're like, yeah, that's one of the eternal things that we work on every day for the rest of our lives. So
yeah. So the main thing there's this an etude by Gesmer, he was a flutist, I think either late 19th, early 20th century flutist who wrote a book of etudes, and they're extremely difficult. And all the titles are in French, and so they sound great when you say them in French, but then you translate it to English, and it's like on the flexibility of the lips etude, right? Not, 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 not a really good thing, right?
yeah, I'm gonna write a piece now. I want to write a piece that's called "Sumeri's Hard," and then like translate that into Japanese. Just let the foreign audience go, "Wow, this is beautiful." I'm like, yeah, it's Sumeri's hard.
So, uh, with this with this idea, some of the certain things here, right? So just starting there with the row. Then next. And just slowly do exercises like that, where you're just jumping up the octave and then going back down. All right. So then after you do all those, then you work on going down. And that last one will be the hardest one. But basically, working your way to jump back and forth between these two octaves is really, really important.
Well, in the reverse exercise there, the going from kan to otsu is much more difficult than from otsu to kan
Absolutely.
for most people. And so, don't as you're working on it, don't be discouraged if you have a hard time dropping down because that's tough. And to drop down successfully, from kan to otsu and have it be a nice smooth transition really takes a while.
Yeah. And so that's just one of them. Like I have a if you sign up for our membership, I have a bunch of tips about this, but that would be the one that I would give you just right away to work with. That's easy enough to do because it's clear you can jump through. There's no the extra explanation that's needed. So if you haven't considered already, consider joining up for the membership. There we have hundreds of videos on lessons, and so you could just sign up for the Shoten lesson series, and you'll get a bunch of those tips as you start going through all of the materials. Speaking of which, if you are also watching this, you should consider joining the membership of this channel. There are hundreds of lesson videos, starting with the Shoten lesson series. You get a lesson book that goes along with it, which is I think what is it, 60 pages of music, 60 pages of
Yes.
music, and then I go through each one systematically. We teach you how to play the piece, and almost in every single video, I also give you a technical exercise and some other things to help increase your shakuhachi playing and dexterity, tone control, and all this sort of stuff. The Chuden lesson series has its own technique series that goes along with it, which is 20 lessons that go over each individual techniques, every individual technique that is most commonly used, as well as a tone workshop, which is about an hour and 10 minutes in itself. So if you were kind of confused about what we were talking about with the U and O vowel shapes, that's where he was getting that from. It also comes along with its own book of about 50 pages, and we go over Honkyoku, Minyo, traditional music, Sankyoku, and more. We have the Okuden series, which also continues the same idea. It also includes a private concert area where you can get access to all of my concerts I do, and which I record and I upload here for your viewing pleasure. And then we also have the advanced music course. So altogether, there's so much stuff there. So if you want to learn about shakuhachi and get yourself into the world of shakuhachi, the membership is definitely the way to go. Now, Purdue says something, because we're going to jump back to philosophy for a second. He says music has a deep mathematical foundation. When it sounds good, you can listen to Beethoven without knowing the story behind it. Yeah, and that's a very Pythagorean way of thinking of things, or maybe not Pythagorean, but Pythagorean's followers or Pythagorean followers about music having a relationship with divine numbers and some things like that, and like tuning procedures and whatever. But
Mm.
even talking about Beethoven, you have to look at Schiller, because Beethoven was highly influenced by Friedrich Schiller, and even Schiller's Ode to Joy was one of the main influences on his Ninth Symphony of shaping the message of universal brotherhood. Because he was so inspired by his poems' ideals of freedom, justice, and human happiness. So that's why he incorporated it into the finale of his Ninth Symphony.
Well, it's really important too to remember that if you're not playing these pieces in the 432 megahertz standard,
Oh, stop it! Stop it! Oh, stop it!
I just had to throw that in there to, bring things full circle, come back around to the music of the spheres, and
I this is the sort of thing like where people say, oh, Beethoven's metronome markings, he actually didn't mean 88, he meant 87. It's like, oh, jeez, stop it. And there's people who have fights about that. Okay, just
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that the 432 thing is so funny just because honestly, if you haven't delved into it, honestly, go on the internet and look. It's a hilarious rabbit hole of my
no.
favorite. Like I said a couple weeks ago, my favorite thing is the Nazi
The Nazi
conspiracy.
432. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that they created the 432 standard to make people unsettled and to make the
the
populace.
440 standard. Yeah.
Yeah, the 440 standard to make the populace unsettled. So that because 432 is the natural standard, I'm like, "Ah, man."
Yeah, no. The British did that at a in a treaty meeting in the 1920s because that's what British people do. Okay.
Yeah, and I just like to throw that in there to keep us from getting a little too far into gazing at our own navels as we talk about these things. So,
Well, it's kind of like one of the things if when I talk to some of my friends about this sort of stuff, especially when we bring up Schopenhauer, he has a quote that a long quote about basically saying that when you read, you're reading yourself, you're reading the opinions of somebody else. So you're allowing someone else to think for you when you read their
right.
works. So if you read day in and day out, you're literally reading yourself dumb because you're never allowed to think.
Yeah. Yes. And that actually is a problem, I think, with the memorization issue as well. If your wit and wisdom all comes from memorizing someone else's wit and wisdom, you might not have much of your
Mhm.
own. So, yeah, yeah. So here we are, full circle,
There
back where
we
we
are.
start.
I like it when things dovetail and things go for full circle. I always enjoy that.
I agree. And this actually brings us to, we're just about at an hour here.
Yep.
Might be a good time since I see that you are wearing some of the new
Oh, that's right.
merchandise.
Some of the merch, y'all. If you need to get a T-shirt, if we're talking about expressivity and stuff like that. Yeah, go ahead and get yourself a T-shirt with Nose and Talent because here's the
Uh,
thing. It's not about talent. It's not about physically being able to do everything. It's also about being natural when you play, and that's what this entire T-shirt brand embodies. It's just you can't create a masterpiece by just pure technical prowess. You're actually going to have to have something you want to say, and it has to be something that you want to say naturally. What makes like someone like Ryokan Taigu such an amazing calligrapher and artist is that he's completely free. He paints when he paints, and doesn't paint when he doesn't want to paint. So go ahead and check out some of our fluff and merch at the Tairyu Shakuhachi website, aka Shanghai Music website, and pick up yourself a shirt. There's also shakuhachis and all this kind of stuff. There will be a new section on the website, by the way, where we'll be offering rare and collectible items of shakuhachi stuff. So it will be things like really, really old scores, shakuhachi
mm,
stuff, and rare flutes, hitoyogiri, memorabilia, and things like that. We also have a comment here, JP. こんにちは、日本に住ん、今は住んでますか？Yeah, はい、住んでます。今は奈良県で住んでます。So that is part of the website thing. So that's what's happening over there. Of course, we have the membership, so sign up for that. We live stream every single week on Monday at this time. So if you always have your questions ready about Shakuhachi. That's what we're here for, to answer your Shakuhachi questions. Linus, do you have anything else you'd like to talk about?
no, just want to remind people to like, subscribe, share the video. When you press the subscribe button, you got to go and actually press the bell button because that's the actual subscribe button, and and make sure that you join us again next week. And if that is all you have, Sensei,
All right, take us out.
all right, then make sure that you practice. Make sure that you row for 10.